RelativityDrive, introduction to it. What we're going to cover is first I'm going to get a count of all the Linux, Windows, and Mac users in here because the setup is a little bit different in terms of editing the .NET files. We're going to talk about what the RelativityDrive configs are. We're going to talk about who made it, how to get it. You probably already guessed you get it through RouterGods.com. You can also get it through the INE forums. What's contained inside, we'll open it up as you prepare to set it up. We'll also talk about how to make it work, and we'll go through a test run. So yeah, it's being very psychedelic in the flashing. That's a Google Hangouts thing. The Camtasia is going to looks like it's recording just fine. So something up with Google Hangouts. And then the majority of the time we're going to do a test run. We'll pretend that we're going through the workbook, and we'll pick a section and we'll start it up and make sure everything is running just fine. All right. So just to get a count of everyone, who is running Linux in the room? Okay, so we got 3 people, 4 if you include myself. Who is running Windows? Okay, Tony's running Windows. Okay. Not bad. And Mark is running Windows. That flashing is awesome. Okay, anyone running a Mac? Okay. Yeah, Macs are... I don't really know how to get GNS3 to run on a Mac. But you guys on a Mac, do you have GNS3 already up and running? Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay, so we kind of have a split, kind of like a 4, 3, and 2. And so RelativityDrive, what is it? Well, if you guys have purchased INE's workbooks, you'll see that they have a particular topology that they use, and I'll pull it up. So the topology they use for the workbooks is designed for a physical rack. You know, they want you to use a physical rack for it. So what people have done is in GNS3, GNS3 is obviously not a physical rack, it is a virtual rack. And some of the interfaces are different. If I remember correctly, I actually haven't played with the topology in quite a while, so I'm trying to do this from memory. But as I remember, this section right here, the R3 section, or R3 router, these interfaces are labeled a little bit differently versus the physical rack. If you have if you're looking at the actual physical rack diagram, you can probably verify that. But if I remember correctly, over here in this section, R3 section, this is configured a little bit differently. So the saved configs that they have are going to bomb out if you try to load it inside of GNS3. So what this guy did is he adapted the config, he changed it up, and then he also changed the saved configs that are in each router. So as we open up RelativityDrive, I'll tell you what I mean. And it's in my projects folder, RelativityDrive, workbook 1. So these are all the .NET files. Inside of the folders, these particular folders are the configs for the routers. So if we look up BGP, basic BGP, and look up router 1, R1, you'll see that we have our IP addresses already assigned in there. There we go. The serial link, the frame relay, that's already set up. EIGRP is already set up. BGP is already set up. So this is a basic BGP. So most of the BGP is already set up. You're just going to play with communities or whatever, more advanced topics in BGP. So everything's already pre-configured for you. You don't need to do any introduction stuff. So you could just start up your workbook and go from there. And for those of you guys who, well, how many of you have already purchased your INE workbook? Okay, good. So we don't have any freeloaders in here. That's awesome. You know, their workbooks aren't that much, and they take time in making them, so it's good stuff. So I'm going to just open up the OSPF one. Just hold on for a second while I resize everything. and share a screen. Okay, you're looking at the INE workbook for OSPF. Well, Kenneth, you don't need it for today. I'm just, using this as an example. Would have been good to have it though, but that's okay. All right, so looking at this workbook, you'll see that the first section, these are all the problems. OSPF is pretty heinous. It goes up to 47 tasks, and of course, inside each task is a subtask. Looking at the solutions, these are the same problems, just with the answers in them. So if you were to start this workbook, what you would do is you would go to 6.1, and at the beginning of each workbook, each section of the workbook, it will tell you to load in the appropriate starting configurations. So here it's telling you load in the initial OSPF configurations. Initial OSPF configurations. So if we go back to the wonderful Linux Mint in GNS3, let me reshare my screen. Okay, so remember they said initial OSPF. You open up RelativityDrive Workbook 1 and just make this bigger. You'll see here that there is initial OSPF .Net. Right? So you open this up, it's going to load in all the configs and you'll be able to ready and rock with that first task. Right? Of course, getting to that point, getting to where your .NET files are already configured, set up correctly, that's what we're going to cover today. Okay, so what is it? It helps you mess around with INE's stuff. If you're going to mess around with Narvik stuff, I'm going to upload that a little bit later, so probably next week or something like that. So you'll have the starting configs for GNS3 to at least his first Foundation Volume 1, Volume 2, in Advanced Routing and Switching Volume 1 and Volume 2. So the first two sets of workbooks. And right now I'm working on the third set, which is his Advanced Boot Camp workbook. That's the one that you get actually at the boot camp. So for you Narvik fans out there, you are not being left in the dust. So who made it? On the INE forums, there's a guy called RelativityDrive. That's why it's called RelativityDrive. It's because he made it. And let's see if I can find him. My name, that's my name. This guy right here. So Mr. RelativityDrive, he is in London. He's actually a pretty awesome guy. He's got a PhD in chemistry. Look at that, PhD in chem. So good guy. He put these out, and on the INE forums, he's got these files for download. I downloaded them, and then what I did is I modified them a little bit to work for Linux and Windows. He did most of the work. I just kind of touched it up a bit. So Alan Graham, that's the guy who made all of this stuff, and so he's helped quite a few people with these configs. So most of the credit goes to him. Almost all the credit goes to him. So how to get it? Very easy. RouterGods.com. You go to Resources, GNS3 Topologies. Scroll down here to the CCIE Routing and Switching section. And it's been rolled into what's called the Mega Grand Unified INE configs for all the workbooks. It's kind of a weird, nasty name for it, but just go in here, go on download. That's the main thing that's going to download a zip file that you'll unzip, and then go to Layer 3 Topology as a PDF. Good. And then, so if you haven't downloaded these already, go ahead and click on download and download a copy to your computer. So my site's going to get hammered a little bit, but that's okay. I'll download one just for the heck of it. You can see it's very small, 5.1 megs. When you unzip it, it's going to grow quite a bit larger, and that's because it's text files, and most of the stuff is repeating data. So zip for that works very, very well. You may also want to download the layer 3 topology as a PDF. That's going to be this file right here. If you're running two monitors, which you really should be running two monitors, when you practice with INE stuff, have this on a second monitor. What you could also do is, how many of you have an iPad or an e-reader? Yeah, so if you have an iPad or e-reader, throw this PDF in there, and it's going to save you a lot of headaches. Now, after you practice a while, basically when you get to, assuming you do the workbooks in order, like switching, frame relay, basic IP, RIP, that, kind of like that order. Once you get to OSPF, you're going to have this diagram burned in your head. You're going to just remember it without any problems, without even looking at stuff. But when you're first beginning, it's helpful to have this. If you want, what some other people do is they draw it out manually, and that's actually good practice because you'll have to do it in the lab. Right? So more monitors, the better. Right? Okay, so download that PDF. And let's take a look at what's inside. Let's open it up. So download right here, Grand Unified INE, right click, extract here. So we have several folders here. We've got drawings. We got, I threw in GNS3. Okay. Or actually that might have already been there. Let's kill that. We have a folder for Linux and Macs. We have a folder for Windows. We have some troubleshooting docs, and we have instructions. So if you're a Linux or Mac user, really easy. You go into this folder, you select that, and you drop it into your projects folder, your GNS3 projects folder. If you're a Windows guy, same thing. Go into Windows, that folder right there, select all of these, and drag and drop into your GNS3 projects folder. I make it very simple for you guys. So what's inside? Let's take a look. We have the configs and setup for workbook 1 and workbook 2. We also have a setup for troubleshooting. This troubleshooting you should not even think about running unless you have somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 gigs or more and a very, very fast computer. If you try to run this on a rinky-dink single core 4 gig computer, you could probably run it, it's going to hurt. And even on the fastest computers, the troubleshooting lab is painful. So let me show you what I mean. Let's see if I have a picture in here. Do I have a picture? Maybe I don't. I will do this. I'll open it up. So here's the .NET file. There's router 12, there's router 10, there's router 16, router 14, 15, 13, 4, R1. It just keeps going and going. Oh, and this switch right here, this is like the most badass switch in the world. It connects everything together. Dear God. And yeah, it just keeps going and going and going and going. 18, 19, 20, 24. I think is it at 24 routers? It might be 24 routers, 4 switches, I think. Yeah, so you're talking about almost 30 devices for that. So that's for another meetup. Most of you are going to be starting at workbook 1. You can see in here, in these folders are the configs for the different sections. Now in some sections they have more than one config. So for example, look at EIGRP. I have a 4- initial EIGRP and 5- basic EIGRP. Initial EIGRP means these are the configs when you start off that section, and EIGRP is not set up yet. So there's no EIGRP running. Basic EIGRP means that as you work through that EIGRP section, you're going to hit a task that says, okay, your EIGRP is already up and running. Configure these advanced features. So in these, EIGRP is already in there. And I could show you that by just going into, let's take R1. And somewhere in here should be EIGRP. So basic EIGRP means that EIGRP is already running. Same thing with basic OSPF. Basic OSPF means OSPF is already running. Okay, here it's called full OSPF. It's the same thing. Full OSPF is already, things are already up and running. Basic BGP means BGP is already being configured. You're just doing advanced stuff. All right, so you can see the progression. The base just means the names are there and pretty much nothing else. Full layer 2 means all the VLANs are done and frame relay is done. We have OER, RIP, EIGRP, OSPF, BGP, multicast, interdomain multicast, IPv6, QoS, security, system management. These are like the easy peasy stuff at the end, but if you don't study these, you'll fail. IP services, and then MPLS VPN. Right? And then for each of those folders, there is an associated .NET that calls all that stuff up. Okay. Any questions up until this point? So we've downloaded it and we've unpacked it, and we're just kind of looking at the contents inside. Okay, so you've downloaded all of these, or you've unpacked it, you popped it somewhere, but if you double click on any of these, or actually if you run GNS3 and then double click on these .NETs, it's still not going to work because you're going to need to set paths and IdlePC and all other types of stuff. So just open any one of these .NET files. Just pick one. I'll pick IPv6.net. And we'll just take a look now how it looks normally. And this is going to pertain to Linux guys. So the Linux guys, you'll see that your paths, it's set like /opt/GNS3/temp. That's your working directory. We've got your image, which is probably going to be different, right? And your configs, you don't need to mess with so these configs right here, this is a full path. This is probably going to be a little bit different. So you can see we've got a couple things we need to change. So your find and replace feature inside of your text editor is going to help you, quite a bit. So how do we do this? Well, our first order of business is this working directory here. You probably can leave that the same. If not, what we'll do is open up GNS3. And you're going to grab a lot of that stuff first from preferences. So inside preferences, go to Dynamips. And this is going to be your working directory right there. So I'm going to copy that. And what I'd like to do is, if you're editing this thing, just hit enter a bunch of times and paste your stuff up there. Don't worry, because after we finish with all of this stuff, we're going to erase the white space and get back to normal. So this is kind of like your working area that you're pasting your crap into temporarily. So that's your working directory. That is what you're going to be replacing this. So your image path, that's going to be inside GNS3. Go up to edit. Oops, wrong place. Go up to edit. Wow. There we go. Edit iOS images. Click on your image that you have already installed. Make sure you're clicking on the one that has the checkmark by default image for this platform. We hope to God that you're running the 3725 image. And then just select that whole thing. You could do a Control A and Control C. That's your whole path. Go back to that text file. Whoops. Where'd it go? I have way too many things open. And paste it in there. So working directory, the path to your image, iOS image, and the last thing we want is we want to go back to GNS3, edit, iOS images, click on your default image, and right here under IdlePC is your IdlePC value. So what you'll see there is that IdlePC, if you're running this inside of VMware, a lot of times you'll see that IdlePC value be the same for VMware because basically your quote-unquote CPU in VMware is going to be the same no matter what actual machine you are running on, because it's a virtual machine. It's going to be the same no matter what processor you run it on. So copy this IdlePC. I'm just going to close out of GNS3. And so we have our three values there that are important for us to mess with. So the question by Scott is, how much of workbook 1 can be simulated in GNS3? Everything except switching and some of multicast and some, maybe half of QoS. So a lot of the QoS is done on the switching part. So yeah, GNS3 is not gonna mess with that. And yeah, so you'll run into just weird funky stuff once in a while, but a good 85 to 90% of workbook 1 is doable within GNS3. And then just get some switches to augment that, or rack rental, or buy a real rack. There's many ways you can get around that. Okay, so we have our three values. Now your Windows guys, the process is going to be the same. You're going into GNS3, you're grabbing these three things, the working directory, the path to your image, and your IdlePC. You're going to be doing the same thing. Now, if you're on Windows, you have the option to use Notepad++. And Notepad++ has a global find and replace. Now, why is this important? You see this working directory here? You're going to be replacing this with this. Now you may be saying, okay, not a big deal because I just have to do it once here. Well, it's once over here and it's going to be once another time down here somewhere. Yep, that's another one. So it's two. You may be thinking, okay, twice is not a big deal. But remember, you've got all these other .NET files. Right? So in Notepad++, you can drag all of these .NET files in there and replace that instance of text in one shot. That's what I like about Notepad++. Now it's dangerous if you don't know what you're doing because you've just destroyed all of your files that way, but it's not a big deal. You just unzip it again or download it again. But it's a lifesaver once you get used to it. Okay. Okay, so let's run through this. Let us copy this working directory. Okay, this is the correct one. We'll copy. And what you'll do here, select the part you want to replace, Control V, and you overwrite it. That's pretty good. And we'll do it the caveman way. We'll just scroll down here. Ooh. There we go. And we'll replace it that way. Now if you know your command line, you know your shortcuts, you can easily use the shortcut equivalent to do that. IdlePC is whatever your IdlePC is for the Mac. The Mac is probably going to have a different IdlePC. Okay, now this image file right here, this image file you're going to be replacing with the one you copied over. Now coincidentally, since I'm the one who made the RelativityDrive stuff modifications, this matches, so I don't need to do that. But copy, select this part, and paste. Now in most text editors you will have a find and replace feature, so that in some instances may be a lot easier to use, maybe a lot better. And then you'll do the same for IdlePC. Copy your IdlePC value and replace it down there. Yeah, or use a script. What you could do is there's a guy out there who made, what was it called? What's that GNS3 built-in utility out there? So there's a pre-made GNS3 Linux distro out there. It's made by, I forget his name, but he has a nice script in there to convert stuff. So either way, GNS3 Workbench, that's it. So, there's a script in there that does it. You could just rip it out of there and, do it yourself or repurpose it. Okay, so you save your .NET file. So here I don't need to save it. And then you're going to need to do that for all of your .NET files. Now, what you could do is, since you're not going to be messing around with multicast right away, you can do this one by one as you progress up. You're probably going to be starting with, let's see here, full layer 2 or the base. So this is the bare one. Actually, let's see if I click on that. Yeah, that's the base. I should have called bare base. Actually, I'll do that now. Base.net. All right, so you can see that it takes a little preparation to get these working for you. So we're going to do a little test run. Let's fire things up. Or actually, before I do the test run, any questions about what I just shared? The reason you're going to need to replace that is if you don't correct the IdlePC, when you fire up those 8, 9 devices, you're going to be hurting for CPU power. And if you don't correct the iOS image path, things are going to bomb out. Your routers are not going to start. Oh, and I forgot one more thing. Yeah, this is probably important too. Where your configs go, you're going to have to change that to point to the full path or the relative path of where the configs are. And so I've done it a little bit differently because I've separated out the .NET file from the folders. You can make your life a lot easier by putting the .NET file inside of these folders. And that way, when you go to this config, you can strip off all of this crap before the router number. So you could just have that. That's because it's in the same folder. But what I did is because since the .NET's outside, it seems easier for organization. It may or may not be, but I need to have extra stuff in front of R5 to get GNS3 to point to the correct place. In the top level that GNS3 is starting at in looking at the configs is if you go down here, GNS3 data configs, that's where GNS3 is going to start looking. So actually I may be able to get away with just taking out all this crap beforehand since it's looking for your configs in that spot. I'll have to try it a little bit later. So you actually need to change 4 things in order to get this to work. May seem like a lot of work, but you only need to do it once per computer. This is why I recommend VMware, because it just makes your life a lot easier. And for those of the guys that attend our boot camps, so we had 2 guys attend the Bangkok boot camp, they got a special VMware image that everything just works. So I can't put that on the net because I just don't want to put it on the net because it's got everything already configured 100%. But when you're personally at the boot camp, it's not a big deal for me to give you a USB stick and transfer it that way. Any questions before we move on and go through a test run? All right. Let's close that out. Don't save. So how do we run all this stuff? Well, pretty easy. Let's fire up GNS3. So there's GNS3 ready to rock and roll. We'll go up to File and Open. Now my particular screen, you can see I got a lot of stuff because I just have a lot of stuff. I put it in RelativityDrive, and here's my workbook 1. So go into workbook 1 and look into, let's do, which .NET shall we do? Pick a topic. Who wants? We'll go by votes. OSPF, EIGRP, RIP. We got MPLS, QoS, multicast. Any topic, pick a topic. Frame relay, EIGRP. Oh, everyone else is gun shy. Okay, we got 2 votes for EIGRP. I know it's cheating, but okay. So let's do basic EIGRP. So the EIGRP is already in there. So right here, basic EIGRP. Now, if for some reason this isn't the .NET that you just edited, so it's not ready yet, that's fine. Pick the one that you just edited. But in my case right here, just for demonstration, I'm going to open this up. It's importing the topology, and if everything works, you should get this icon here. Or not, there's a bunch of icons right here. Right, everything's already connected. If the path to your routers is incorrect, this will not load. You will get an error. If the IdlePC is not set correctly, it will still load, but what will happen is as soon as you start this up, it's going to hurt. But it will still load up to this point. Okay. And before we start it up, let's talk a little bit about the difference between the logical topology and the physical topology, because this is the one that gets a lot of people when they first start out. I know it got me because it was kind of confusing when I first started this. So if we look at our diagram, and I closed it. So let's go back to the layer 3 topology. Now if we zoom in on this top portion here, we have routers R4, R1, and R6. All 3 routers are connected to one link. You can see fast01 on R4 side, fast00 on R1 side, and fast00.146 on R6's side. Now, I'm sure all of you have connected stuff with Ethernet, but I'm not aware of any cable that actually splits out into two Ethernet segments going out here. So what's happening here is you're looking at the logical diagram. Logical meaning this is the layer 3 diagram, and everything is from the perspective of these particular routers. There's crap in the middle that is not in the layer 3 diagram. So there's switches and shit in the middle that you need to get right before you can get to the layer 3 diagram and get those right and get them to ping from side to side. So in your workbooks is the actual physical diagram. You can also, there's lots of places you get the physical diagram from, but if I scroll up, I need to screen share this one. Let's screen share the workbook again. Okay, let's see if we can find that physical diagram. Okay, so you can see this is the physical diagram. And if we look at R1, you can see R1 is connected to switch 1. So fast 0, 0 on R1 connects to fast 0, 1 on switch 1. Now in the layer 3 diagram, we had it talking with R4 and R6. So let's see where we can find R4. R4 is way down here. Okay, so how many switches does R1 need to get through before it can hit R4? And look at that, R6 is right below that as well. So if we're going from R1 to R6 or R4, so R1's in the upper left, R4 and R6 are at the bottom. We have to go through two switches, right? If we're going the most direct route, we're going through two switches. Right? So a lot of times if things aren't pinging, you're at layer 3, you're trying to ping from R1 to R4, it's not pinging, you may want to check the switches in between. Now in real life, you probably wouldn't wire it this way, but the reason for this is because in the CCIE lab, you're only dealing with 6 routers and 4 switches and 3 backbones. So they're being very creative here in messing with the topologies and in giving you different topologies. So what's happening here with every major rack vendor out there and the CCIE lab, they keep the rack of routers and switches cabled up the same. They do not change the cabling that I'm aware of. The cabling is not touched from day to day. It stays the same. All they're doing is they're changing the switches and the VLANs behind the scenes to make it look like, well, in one lab, router 1's connected to R6. In the next lab, the next day, you change the VLANs around and R1's connected to R3. Change the VLANs around again and now R1's connected to R2. So physically connected the same, logically in the background things are changing and making the layer 3 look different. Right. Does everyone understand that concept? That's a very, very important concept to understand. And you should go on the INE forums, the IEOC forums, and look up the layer 2, the switching for workbook 1. And it's kind of funny because you'll see this big long thread about this guy starting his CCIE studies, and he just gets owned on the first workbook question. The very first workbook question is just set up your VLANs and stuff, and he can't do it because he can't grasp that there's crap in the middle of all of your routers. And it does take time to get used to INE's topology. And then when you take Narbich's class, it takes time to get used to his topology. So they're all different. All right. Okay, let's go back to GNS3. Okay. So going back to GNS3, we've got our routers here. They're not started yet, so click that play button. And while we're waiting for those to start up, Kenneth has a question. Okay, so Kenneth's question is, do you only need one working directory? You don't need to create multiple working directories for each topology. So the working directory is just a temp folder that it sticks all the crap into. And correct, you could just use one, right? So on Windows, it could be like C:/temp, Windows temp, whatever. This is the stuff that gets erased after you stop GNS3. You hope it gets erased. And actually, that's a good question. Let me just show you what's in that temp folder. So if we go to Edit and Preferences in Dynamips. So let's see, temp folder, home, RouterGods, GNS3 temp. Okay, let's check that out. Let's see what's in that temp folder. And computer is slowing down just a little bit because my routers are at that press enter screen, so that's okay. That's okay. Temp folder. Okay, so here's my temp folder, and what's in there? Well, we have got, you'll notice if you go in your temp folder that one of your files is going to be 256 megabytes. Reason this is 256 megabytes is your router's RAM, your virtual router's RAM, is 256 megabytes large. So it's emulating, simulating, however you want to call it. It's running that much RAM as a file on your hard drive. Now, even though you're running 6 routers and 4 switches and 3 backbone routers, so 13 devices, you'll see that if you scroll down here, that 256 megabyte file only appears once. Right? It only appears once. And the reason is, this is what that, there's that one option in GNS3 under Dynamics Preferences. It says like use Ghost iOS or something like that. So what this means is, since all of your routers are running the 3725 image, it only needs to run one of these. If you're an idiot and you uncheck that box, every router that runs is going to have a 256 megabyte image. So what happens is, this is the main image, and then as you scroll down, each particular router is going to have changes and settings for that, and it's not going to be that much. It's going to be a couple megabytes and K and stuff like that, so it's not going to be a big deal. And then when you stop GNS3, all of this gets cleaned up and erased. Okay. So now hopefully you understand why, if you really want to get the most out of GNS3, you should have a lot of RAM, you should have a fast CPU, and you should have an SSD, because all of this is getting written to your SSD and constantly being accessed. Right. So that's what's in your temp folder. Now, if you run, if you're running GNS3, if you've started GNS3, stopped it, and try to run it again, and you find that your routers aren't running correctly, it's quite possible that your temp folder never got cleaned out. So all this crap here stayed, and that's a very easy problem to fix. You just close GNS3, select all the files in here, Control A, hit delete, and clear it out. So most of the time that helps out in solving GNS3 problems, just nuking the temp folder. In the new versions of GNS3, it has an option to automatically clean the temp folder, and I believe it is checked by default. So now that everything is running, click on the console button right here, console to all devices. And the Linux guys, if you're running console, go to edit, copy input to all tabs, and when you hit enter, enter is going to hit all of your tabs in there. And just remember to go to copy input to, click it back to none. If you don't have that option, it's very easy. Just go through your tabs, hit enter a bunch of times as you click through your tabs. Because you don't want to be at that press enter screen. It's going to kill your CPU. So your main goal here is to go through all your tabs, make sure you're not at this press enter to get the prompt. So you can just click through your tabs, hit enter a bunch of times. Click on BB1, enter, enter. Click on switch 4, enter, enter. BB3, enter, enter. Or if you have console that starts with a K, go up here, edit, copy input to all tabs. This will make it so whatever you type in hits all of your tabs. I have a video on it on my YouTube page, so just watch that if you can't follow along. But copy input to all tabs, and now when you hit enter on R3 or whatever router you're on, it's gonna fling it, it's gonna broadcast it to all of your tabs. Right. So, and I think if you run secure CRT, I think there's a command that you could send output or send keystrokes to every window or every tab. Yeah. Okay, so we got this running. The first thing you want to check when you have this stuff up and running is go to one of your switches. So go to switch 1 and just make sure that you have your VLANs in there. And this is for the guys who are anything past the bare configs. So the bare configs have nothing, just the name of the router, and that's it. But everything past that should have the VLAN information. So this is GNS3. Instead of show VLAN brief, it's show VLAN switch. And if you see VLANs like 5, 7, 8, 146, you should be okay. Right. Now, generally, if you see the VLANs on switch 1, they'll probably be on all the other VLANs. But you just might want to verify. Now, another test, if you're on short on time, you just want to get to labbing, instead of checking the switches, one way to do it is just go on R1 and ping all 255s. And if you get a response back from .6 and .4, you know your VLANs are good, because all the switching in between is set up correctly. So now you're off and running. It took us a little while to get all these configs 100%. When I first got RelativityDrive, we were loading them up, and sometimes the VLANs wouldn't come up or anything like that. But now it seems to be okay. Now I'm just working on cleaning up the stuff in Workbook 2, because there's a lot of improvement we could do on the configs for that workbook. Okay. Everyone able to get their particular .NET file to run? Anyone having problems? So your GNS3 should be fairly responsive. If you have a decent computer, you should be able to do stuff like show IP protocols. There shouldn't be any lag or noticeable lag in your stuff. So Scott's still trying to get past the enter screen. So all of your routers still at the press enter screen? Okay, let's see. So Tony's doing a good job. He's sharing his screen. That's awesome. So it looks like it's running fairly well on your screen. I see green lights on your interfaces. Yeah, your CPU is pretty low. Actually, you can't really get much lower than that. So yeah. Tony, what kind of computer do you have? Nice. Very nice. Yep. So cool thing about running ESX is you can completely jack that thing up. Not a big deal. Reset. Oh, wow. So you actually got 8 cores in that thing. In computers, no such thing as overkill. You got 8 real cores. Yeah. Not like those guys who have quad cores with the hyper-threading crap. That's a lot better these days. I'm crossing my fingers and hopefully they'll have an 8-core out, a real 8-core out, what the successor to Ivy Bridge Haswell, hopefully out later this year. Okay, cool. Well, that makes it pretty easy. Is it actually tomorrow? Oh yeah, Computex is just around the corner, so that would actually make sense. Yeah, Computex is first week of June, so yeah. Okie doke, so that's Relativity Drive.